We'll call the regular meeting in the New Ulm City Council for January 16, 2018, 4:30 PM to order. First item on the agenda is your consent agenda items. What's your wishes?
I'll move it.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Any discussion on any? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 2A, consider a motion approving the issuance of a temporary on-sale liquor license for the New Ulm Area Catholic Schools Incorporated. That's for January 27, 2018.
I'll offer the motion.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3A, consider amending section 8.21 of the city code of the city of New Ulm relative to dog and cat leashes.
Haven't we seen this one before?
Just a couple times.
Yes?
I got an opinion expressed about barking, the dogs do as well.
Pardon? You step up to the mic, name and address for the record, please.
I've been doing this for 12 years. My job takes me outside as a newspaper carrier, and it's no fun to listen to them bark at me, that loud staccato piercing bark.
Name, yeah, just give me your name and address for the record.
Stephen Rayside, 310 South State Street.
Okay.
Okay, my job takes me outside, and I gotta listen to this barking in the hot, humid weather, and it's bad enough being out there without listening to that. We have a nice, quiet retirement community here. 12 years I've been living here, except for that dog barking. Not only that, some people don't clean up their backyards, and the smell wafts over the fence or through the slats in the fence. You gotta smell that smell, and it's no fun. It takes one whiff of that dog crap, pardon my French, to spoil your day, spoil your route, spoil your job, ruin your day. And pardon my getting worked up here, but I can't help it.
Have you filed a complaint with the law enforcement or with police?
No.
With the dog barking?
No, it's you're walking down the street, mind your own business, and they bark at you for just mind your own
Oh, I see. So
business.
it's not a neighbor's dog that's doing it?
No, it's
Oh.
I know a guy who works at the back rye. I won't give his name; it's irrelevant. But he has to listen to this little dog bark behind him. That's disturbing the peace. That's a sheer, outright disturbance of the peace.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity.
Thank you for coming.
I guess I have,
Go ahead.
I want some clarification because I read through the information and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it right. The way our law stands now, your dog needs to be on a leash whenever it's off your private property, on the street, in the parks, on the trails. That is our law right now. Dogs are required to be on a leash
No,
Or,
no,
or under direct control.
no. The ordinances currently say that if you're on a trail, the dog has to be on a leash.
Okay?
Otherwise, any place in the city, you're correct, the dog has to be on a leash or under the direct control of a responsible person, whatever that term means. And I guess the problem is that that could mean depending upon the owner. I think the obvious thing would be if you had your hand on the animal around its collar or something, but an individual owner might say, well, if I tell the dog to stop, it's going to stop, or if I give it a dirty look, it's going to stop. But there isn't really any guidance that would be very enforceable, I think.
But right now, there's no difference between a park and the sidewalk. It all falls under that same.
Except for, you're correct,
Ex-
except for the city trails.
Except for the city
But there's
trail.
no longer that distinction for a park, sidewalk, any other public area or private area.
Okay.
I thought there was some discussion when we talked about this last time about potentially looking at a couple parks that could be designated non-leash parks and the other ones potentially could be, where they had to be on a leash. Did that happen at Park and Rec with the commission? Was there discussion about that, and if so, what was that entail?
Tom Schmitz, Park and Recreation Department. President Schmitz, Councilor Schultz, council members. We have a number of municipal-owned properties that could be considered for that. I don't have a report listing those for you today, but I could come up with that. I would like to simply point out, the few options you have on your action form. One is to reinstate the leash law in parks. B is to instate a leash law on public property, including right-of-ways. And then C is the private property question. And then D, of course, is a leash length, if you want to establish a maximum leash length like state parks have and some communities have. New information in your packet I want to point out is certainly the Minnesota Valley Council of Governments. The COG got some data information for us. You see that 2-page document, dog and cash leash regulations. 2 pages listing a number of communities. I think it's 29 pure market cities and 22 require a leash law on public property. You have that in the packet. And then also our animal control officer, Corporal Keith Anderson, has presented his 1-page report that's in your packet of dog bites over the past 3 years. And then the Park and Recreation Department conducted a month-long survey, public survey, using an online SurveyMonkey site. Also had paper copies available, and you have all that information in your packet also. A vast majority of respondents, basically 70 or 80%, were advocating a strengthening of the leash law. So I just wanted to reiterate that and point those items out in your packet.
I do appreciate the survey, by the way, the Park and Rec Director. In my mind, this is the 3rd time this has come into City Council with this leash law with cats and dogs. I mean, the survey kind of told me what the general public was looking at. The comments written were very interesting all across the board. I myself, I'm open. We do have some, I'm going to call non-improved parks, if we would choose to open those up to let dogs run, whether it be the South Market Park or Minicon. In my mind, I don't know why it ever went away that we did have the leash law. I had heard years back we had it where it had to be on a leash. There was no indirect control of the owner. I mean, I'm all for what the general public on the survey, just put the leash law back into effect. City parks, your dog's on a leash. Public right-of-way, it's on a leash, and move forward from there. That's my take on it.
I guess when we tabled it the last time, I guess we had tabled it with the thought of coming up, having a list of parks that we would maybe have options of what parks we would, before we decide on a leash law, there's got to be some place where somebody can take and run their dog in a park, and other than the actual dog park, where they can just take their own dog and take and run and throw a ball and some open space. I think if you look at the survey, I thought it was interesting. I think out of all of the cities, I think it was 50-50 had a leash law in parks.
Yep.
I mean, that was less.
It was very interesting that some
nobody
park,
pointed-
they had nothing at all.
Right.
But
Nobody pointed that out. That
Right.
in their parks, they still allowed the dogs off leash in 50% of them. So I guess I'm not opposed to a leash law when they're on a sidewalk. I still think we need to have some open space other than the dog park, in parks that people can walk to their local park and let their dog off a leash and throw a ball. Yeah, whether it's in, some of them have a direct control. I mean, a lot of them, not a lot of them, there's a few of them that have a voice command, in their control, on a leash, or voice command is what theirs is. So I guess I don't not support a leash law, but I still think we can do some justice with having some.
Mr. President, we do have our animal control officer here. I wonder if we want to, I think that was the other thing we wanted to hear from him
Yeah.
before we made a decision, but.
Corporal Keith Anderson, New Ulm Police Department, Animal Control Officer. I had talked to Counselor Schultz earlier, and I am in favor of a leash ordinance. I do differ on some areas. I don't have a problem where if we could have some parks where, that are designated for the dogs to run off leash. I'm also a little leery of the public or the private property issue. I'm a little leery of that. However, I think if we're going to do that or allow them to be off leash on private property, we need to further define the direct control. I've trained several dogs in my lifetime, and I can tell you there isn't a single dog that I've ever dealt with, been around, that is 100% obedient when they're called. And so we need to be careful with that. I mean, I read all the comments through the survey, and I know there was a lot of, well, my dog's this, my dog's that. That may be fine, but there is no dog in this world that is 100% obedient. And so, you know, you're out, your dog takes off, you can't control it. It's no longer under direct control, and you don't know what's going to happen at that point. So, again, I certainly would not have a problem with having a couple of parks where the dogs can run loose, but I think on public property, they should be on a leash.
It looks like, according to our report, a majority of the dog bites in the last 3 years did occur on private property, however.
Yes.
And I questioned with the officer, am I correct? One part kind of left out what I had heard. Some of those were actually in the home?
A majority of those are actually inside the home.
Right. I just want to stress that, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You said on the private property, they were in the home.
Yes,
Not,
yes. A majority of those are actually inside the residence.
Right.
That's good to know, thank you.
I do have one more question for Tom Schmitz, the director. I mean, I don't want it to come back again. You're very familiar with the parks. I believe all the counselors here are familiar with all our parks. Can we make that decision tonight where we're going to open up Minicon, South Market, or what park? Or it has to go back to Park and Rec again and come back to council again? I'd like to get...
Unless we authorize Park and Rec to designate, I mean, if he wants it to go back to Park and Rec, we could, otherwise we could designate.
President Schmitz, Counselor Christian, counselors, I might recommend that you try to take action on the leash issue. If you want to expand off-leash dog areas in the community, that to me is another issue. You could authorize expanding the dog park. You could
Mr.
authorize establishing another dog park.
Mr. President, councilors, if the council is going to take any action to change the current situation, it's going to require an ordinance. So it's going to be coming back before you. It would be helpful, of course, to me if you could give me some direction
Yep.
as far as what you were looking for. But there may be time for at least Mr. Schmitz or Park and Rec, if he thinks it actually has to go to the commission, to come up with the recommended parks, which I could include in an ordinance if that was the direction that you wanted to follow. Because ultimately, when we do the first reading, you're going to decide if the language is something that you want to support or not. So, I know
you
you
probably
want to
want-
get this moving, so.
He probably wants something, some definition of that under direct control, either thrown out and some new terminology used.
Well, if, one of the options, I think that's been pointed out, would be to just eliminate that and decide where you want the leashes to be required. Because you either have a leash or you don't. I mean, the direct control, I think, is, Officer Anderson has pointed out, sure, it works many times, but there's no guarantee that's going to work. So.
Right.
I guess my comment is I'd support a leash everywhere except private property. When we went through all the other communities, hardly any had it on private property. They were all no, all the way down. So I think we're just going to create a mess for ourselves if we control dogs that have them on a leash on private property. It's not going to happen anyway.
I
I
agree.
guarantee it's not going to happen.
President Schmitz, if I could recommend then, like I say, if we do define what direct control is, because obviously in those situations, that's where the direct control is going to come to. And I'm just going to give you an example. Earlier this week, we had a gentleman that we took his dog into the pound because it was running loose. And speaking with him, when I released the animal back to him, he said that he had let the dog out to go to the bathroom. He came back 10 minutes later, dog's gone. So I asked him, I said, well, were you in the house at the time? Were you outside the house? He goes, oh, no, I let it out and I stayed in the house. Well, in my mind, that's not direct control.
No.
And so I think we need to define, but in some people's mind, that would be. They say, well, I'm watching him out the window or whatever. I think we need, City Attorney Hippert is going to have to come up with a definition of what that direct control actually is.
Or we could eliminate it and just say leash.
But if you're going to go with the private property where a leash isn't required, then you're still going to have some kind of language that there is control of the animal while it's on their property.
I guess that, as initially proposed, one of the options would have been if a homeowner has a fence or has something where the dog is not going to run off of the property, because as Officer Anderson has pointed out, and of course, people will let their dogs out to go to the bathroom or whatever, but if they just let him out and let him go, what's keeping the dog on the yard? Unless they've got a leash. And our neighbors, when they let their dog out, they put it on the leash if they're not going to be out with it.
I just don't think we can control every
No.
person's movement with a dog on their private property.
I agree
They have
with-
they have to take, they have to be responsible for something. I mean, if
Right.
if they're an owner of a dog, they have to at least take responsibility of the dog on their property. I'm not going to regulate what they do on their property as far as the leash.
Go ahead, name and address for record.
Debbie Christensen, 2201 North Broadway. I am the owner of Pups Playland Dog Daycare and Boarding in town here. And I apologize, I'm kind of coming into this a little bit late in the game, and it sounds like you've more or less decided. I personally am not in favor of the leash law. I know of many people who walk their dogs safely off leash. Their dog listens to voice commands, and that's the way their dog's been trained. And I see it as kind of trying to solve some of these bite issues, which I don't think they're happening with somebody that's out walking their dog down the street off leash 6 feet in front of them. I see them as more as these private property dogs running out to somebody that's maybe walking by their dog. And so you're going to be punishing the people who are walking their dog safely off leash, but yet there's still going to be these dogs that are on private property that are loose, that aren't being watched because they're out for a potty break or just sitting, by somebody's garage. And I think they're the ones that are probably more of an issue as far as going after, because it is their property, that's just their nature. And somebody's walking by with their dog. I don't think it's somebody out, they're not causing bites if they're out walking their dog down the sidewalk. Maybe there are instances, and I didn't get everything read through, but I think we're kind of trying to take care of the problem by putting walking dogs on a leash, and I don't think that's really where the problem is. That's
Deb, did
just-
you get a chance to read all the material
I
about this?
didn't, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I just kind of crept, it was, I forgot about it, so I just kind of, I'm listening, and it's like, you're ready to decide, so I apologize for that.
No, and you certainly know your animals, and you certainly were a huge help in getting our dog park going, so thank you for that. And there are a lot of people in here that talked about being terrorized by vicious, large dogs and walking in the area. So there's certainly yours that are tame, and you've done a very good job of that. But there's that other population, I think, is why we're here and why this issue's in front
But
of us.
are they the ones that are walking with somebody off leash?
Well, they're in the, yeah,
They're sitting in somebody's yard,
yeah.
yeah.
But,
It's kind of,
Mr. President, I think what the speaker has just pointed out is the problem with not having them controlled in private property, because anecdotally, she's pointing out if you have an owner walking by with a dog, which I've seen fairly often, and there's another dog outside, and that dog goes after the dog with the owner walking it, the problem isn't the walking dog,
That's the
it's
other
the dog that's coming off the private property.
Yeah.
So, which is what you just described. And it,
I understand what our city attorney is saying, but originally this came to us parks, that was it. And now we're opening up the whole spectrum of it, solving all the issues with one crack. Again, I'll go on record, I'm not gonna vote for private property. I don't wanna be a dictator, somebody in their backyard, what they're doing.
He wants to talk.
Go ahead. Oh, first, go ahead.
Penny Pertzer, 323 South Broadway. Well, of course, what Deb has just pointed out and what you have validated is that it is the problem of the dog on private property. It's happened to me many times. It's happened to anybody who walks a dog on a sidewalk, and another dog in its own yard sees me and my dog or somebody else's dog and runs out. I don't know what the intent is, to greet it or to bite it or who knows what. But this is the issue, and it's a safety issue. So I don't know how many times you want to see blood. I don't know what kind of statistics you want to validate this kind of thing, but that is the point. And I don't know, other than the fact that it's the nature of a dog on its own property, of course, and somebody walks by, and let's think about people who are jogging or running. And how often has this happened to them? They're minding their own business on the sidewalk, and a dog comes charging out from its property. I'm sorry, it's noble to say that you don't want to regulate people's behavior on private property and their dog's behavior, but if they're not responsible for their dog, and the only way they can be responsible is if the dog is on the leash or they have a handle on it and they're taking care of it. Otherwise, it's pointless.
With a muzzle too. How much expense is a muzzle in addition to the leash?
Well, anyway, that's the point here, and Deb has zeroed in on it, and I'm grateful for that, because that's the whole issue.
Thank you, ma'am. I like
Well, I guess my comment is I support a leash law, but not on private property. I know it's what everybody is saying, but by God, it's not gonna work. I mean, we can make the law today, and unless we got our police department with nothing else to do but run around and watch dogs, people are gonna let their dog out and do their job, whatever it is, and if you don't get along with your neighbor, you're gonna call in and turn them in, and if you get along with them, you won't, and I don't think we need that hassle. Maybe Roger can write something up where they have to be out there.
By being an asshole.
Just a minute. So, I guess it's up to the rest of the council, but we're gonna have a motion on the floor, but that's where I stand.
I guess I'd like to say a few words. I think we need a leash law within the community, and we can't just have them running at large within every park. It'd be fine if we come back at a later date and define another park or two within the community that people can take their dogs and let them run at large. But I've received a couple calls and comments from a few people that have been attacked in parks, by dogs. And they didn't have a dog with them, and they were on their bicycle, and someone was training their dog, and the dog ran after them, and the people got scared. I'm not saying that's why they bit the person, but, something happened and startled the animal or the individual. So it's just, I'm going to go on record. I think we need to have a leash law in place, and then take a serious look at defining to have another dog park or two within the community. And I think we're going to be opening a can of worms to try to regulate it on people's property. And, whether it's people have a underground fence or a regular fence or dog control, it's going to be a challenge.
So I do hear some compromise here that we do, that we're all supporting a leash law. I think I hear support as well as having a couple parks designated off-leash, but I would really like Park and Rec's opinion on, it sounds like we have time to do this, to give us their opinion on what couple parks they would recommend that be on different ends of the community, of course. So is there a motion in there somewhere? I think we can,
I can,
go ahead.
I'm gonna, to be leashed, let's see here, let's do item B, to be leashed on any public property, including streets and right-of-ways, other than in the dog park fence area. That's my motion.
And designated parks by Park and Rec?
And designated parks by Park and Rec.
Can we put a number on those parks, like maybe 3 different parks?
Yeah.
I was thinking that no more than 3.
One north, one south, maybe one in the
Oh,
middle.
yeah, good idea.
Would Park and Rec have to look at which parks have small children playing on
Yep, that's their
toys?
job. That's their job.
So, that's one of the things that I don't know that I'd like to see some of the parks that have all kinds of good activity things that Park and Rec is paying big money to keep upgrading and make them number one, and then all of a sudden, the kids are afraid to be there because there's dogs running free.
Versus South Park that just has trees. I think,
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
I think they can come up with a good recommendation for us. I'll second your motion.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
So,
That's
Roger, do we have,
Roger?
What was the motion?
do we have enough
Was
for
it with
you
3
to
dog
help?
parks? 3?
Yes, but my understanding would be, before you vote, but my understanding would be that the motion would be as described with option B, the exceptions, well, it wouldn't be applying on private property, it wouldn't apply on the existing dog parks, and it would not apply on up to 3 other public parks to be designated by Park and Rec. And what I'm assuming then would happen would be if the council were to adopt that motion, Mr. Schmitz would get back to me with the recommendations on the parks, because I think the names of the parks should be in the ordinance, so people know where
Yep.
they are.
Yep, I agree.
And then that would be brought before you for the first reading, and if you wanted to make any adjustments or changes, then you'd have an opportunity to do it.
Do we need the length of the leash? Is that what you're coming to ask next?
Correct.
I figured that.
I guess 6 feet. That's what a lot of them in the other ordinances were, was 6 feet.
Some people that walk past my house, they have 2 labs or 3 labs, and I don't know how they would control 3 labs with a 6-foot leash. That's pretty small.
Extend the leash for each dog?
I'm just
It's
saying.
not gonna work.
They're doing a good job, as far as I can see, with the people walking by my house with a longer leash.
Well-
I guess I don't want to, I don't want to designate a length of a leash. We never have in the past. I guess I
It's fine.
would not
I don't
want
have a
to.
problem.
Yeah, I'm fine with not setting a
David?
length. I think it would be opening a can of worms to try to enforce that within the community.
Have to hire a few more people. Officer Anderson would be working 24/7.
All right, any more discussion?
With the tape measure, right? With the tape measure.
Yeah.
You got what you need, Rod?
Yep.
Okay. No more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 3B, consider motion confirming the 2018 appointments of the mayor.
So move.
Second.
We got a motion and a second, any discussion?
Thank you to all of them.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4A, consider resolution authorizing the request of the B&L Bar to temporarily close the alley next to the establishment for a pre-Bach Fest party on Thursday, January 25th, 2018, from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. for the Bach Fest celebration on Saturday, March 3rd, 2018, beginning at 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Sunday, March 4th, 2018, and to authorize the extension of the B&L Bar license into the closed alley area on established dates, requested dates, sorry.
I'll offer the resolution to waive the reading.
Second.
We got a motion to second off the resolution, waived reading. Any more discussion?
I was just giving a little thought. I mean, if we've got another bar down the alley now, so just make sure that it's, there's not going to be, we're not going to be harming their business by blocking off the alley so people can't patrons, or is there going to be is it actually going to be gated off on both ends of the alley there by the building?
We've not heard from that owner or anything though, right?
No.
Has any concerns?
No, we haven't yet.
But just something to consider.
Yep.
Okay, any more discussion? Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 4B, consider adopting a resolution accepting a grant from Minnesota Historical Society and authorize the city manager to sign the grant agreement and to publish and send out requests for proposals for the conditional assessment of the base of the Herman Monument and authorize the city staff to submit for the next grant cycle for 2019.
I'll offer the resolution.
Second.
We got a motion to second off the resolution, waived reading. Any more discussion? That's for a $60,000 grant.
This is, yeah, 60,000. I'd like to hear from Mr. Zaba what this is all about and what it's going to involve. Pretty important statute in our communities.
Elwood Zabel, city building official. Councilor Brett Schmitz, councilors, this is to do a condition assessment of the base from the footings all the way up to the bottom of Herman's Feet, to find out what we've got for what's going on with the monument itself, the moisture intrusion that we've had, we've had to close it down a couple times last year due to some falling debris under the dome and inside the interpretive center. So it's to get an historical architect, engineers in there to just perform a condition assessment of the whole base and try to figure out what we need to do to mitigate our moisture intrusion and make sure it's not in a failing state. And if it is, what we need to do to fix it.
And how long is that, do you know how long that base is? Because it's been falling off now, what, about 2-3 years or maybe longer?
15 years.
15 years, but noticeable the last few years. I mean, really noticeable, the big chunks.
Noticeable for 15 years.
So how long has it been on there, though?
The Goonite's been on there since probably the mid to late 50s is the first mention of the Goonite.
Okay, so it's, okay. All right. We got to get something done up there. It's looking in rough shape.
And one item I want to add to Mr. Zabel's comment is with the State Historical Society, SHPO, we do need this when we do put in for the big grant to fix the monument. This is the start of the pie. Hopefully we can get a $500,000, $750,000 with this assessment, which is good.
So we'll get an idea with the assessment, what needs to be taken care of, and hopefully a budgetary number on that also to be able to apply for the grant this summer.
So he would work on this, we would get this done over the summer months?
No, this will start here. The RFPs will go out this week right away.
Okay.
To look at the timeline here, the grant needs to be in and submitted by July 20th this year. And then we'd find out in December of this, in 2018, if we get the grant or not. So the timeline is starting tomorrow, going through the final draft would have to be in by, I think it's July 11th, I have to have it in by, and submit the grant by the 21st or the 20th.
Great. Thanks for your work on this. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 4C, consider motion authorizing the city manager and the fire chief to proceed with the process of acquiring a new fire engine for the fire department.
Mr. Mako,
You have something on that?
another big ticket item.
President Schmitz and councilors, the sheet, what we're doing is asking for approval to begin spec work and acquiring quotes for a new fire engine. A number of years ago, we set up a replacement fund, and we set that replacement on a 30-year rotation. Currently, we have a 1989 Forstner pumper that will be scheduled for replacement in 2019, next year. If you remember, the last time we had a project like this, it took us about 26 months from the time we gained approval from you to the spec work, to the ordering, and when we received it. So I'd like to begin the spec work on it. Hopefully be back to you, sometime, within 6 to 8 months. Have the specs done and secure quotes, and then prepare to order a truck for delivery in 2019. Currently, these trucks, you're looking at about 365 to 400 days from the day you order to take delivery.
It's kind of like the ladder truck that you talked about, where we tell them what we want and they build it.
Correct.
Wow, it's just so different than the old days.
There's some things that are general, but with each department, there are specifics, to each town, and those are the kind of things that we have to work through before we place an order, get quotes and place an order. And if you notice, we do have $550,000 in that equipment fund for the replacement of this truck.
What I see here is one of the comments we talked about at the budget meeting and stuff, we could be short, so we're really gonna have to, in our 2019 budget, putting some money aside again for replacement. I mean, we did it this year just to cut costs, but we can't keep on doing it.
No.
I would agree. Just looking, normally we build in a 5% increase. I looked up the last 4 years, it averaged out to be about a 7% increase in prices on the truck. So even though we didn't put anything in there this year, I think we need to look real hard at making sure that we get something in there next year, so we keep up with the prices of this equipment.
I'll offer the motion.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4D, consider resolution to accept donations offered to the city for the Park and Recreation Department for the use of Aqua X classes.
I'll offer the resolution, waive the reading to accept the donations to the City of New Ulm Park and Rec Department to be used for Aqua X classes.
Second.
We got a motion and a second off the resolution, waive the reading. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries.
Letters of thanks will be sent, a letter of thanks.
Thank you. Item 4E, consider directing the city attorney to prepare and purchase agreement and authorize the city manager to sign and procure land partial number 001, or .002.039, .01, .010 for the purchase of the for the purchase price of $600 and authorize the city manager to sign the required documents at closing.
I was in attendance at the Park and Rec meeting. They voted unanimously to purchase this unique piece of property. I just let the general public know it's a parcel that is 30 by 50 feet, only 1,500 square feet, located on a city right-of-way by South Market Park. It'll now be hooked to our park, and it's a heck of a deal buying that little parcel hooked to our park for the $600. Very unique.
Any more
Oh, offer to direct the city attorney and prepare and purchase agreement. Authorize the city manager to sign to procure land parcel number 00.001.002.039.01.010 for the purchase price of $600. Authorize the city manager to sign and require all documents at closing.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4F, consider modifying, or modifications of the existing blight ordinance. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an issue that I know different members of the council have raised in the past, and I think there are a number of different concerns that have come up over the course of time about particular issues in New Ulm that are of concern to them, to the population at large. So there hasn't been any change in any of our ordinances for quite a period of time. We became aware that the city of Sleepy Eye recently adopted a blight ordinance. I also provided the council with an ordinance that Minnetonka has, and also a memorandum just generally outlining the issues that you should consider, or whatever you might want to consider is important to you on this. What we already have, and then I have some concerns, quite frankly, about the Sleepy Eye ordinance. I would not recommend that New Ulm adopt that as written. I think there's a bunch of, issues with that. One of the things, just a couple of things that I think the council needs to be aware of, when you look at some of these ordinances, like Sleepy Eyes, it makes reference in many cases to the city undertaking remedial measures if the property owner doesn't do it. I attached a copy of the state law, 429.101, that authorizes cities to specially assess those costs back on the property owner. but it does not apply to everything. I can tell you there's a Court of Appeals case that says if the city has it in its charter, it can apply to more than what is in the statute. Our charter does not have that provision. So when you get into things like making a property, if you ever want to do this, making a property owner paint their house, and if they don't do that, the city paints it and we assess the cost back. A lot of these things, you can have a much broader range of your ability to get the money back if you amend the charter, but it would require a charter commission to do that. So until that happens, we're stuck with what we have, and I think it really depends on what's of concern to the council. If there are particular situations that you see in our community that you think aren't being addressed under the current ordinance, that would be something for you to consider. If you think the current ordinance should take care of it, but it's not being enforced, then that's something that we would need to know, and the police department, because some of these things are subjects of criminal penalties, some of them are subject to civil penalties, and that's another decision. You have the ability to impose fines, or, as I was saying initially, you've got the ability to order the work done, and if it doesn't get taken care of, then step in and do it and assess the property owner with the intention that at some point you will get paid back. So it's such a broad area. I don't know if you're in a position you want to make decisions on this tonight, if you'd want to refer it to a committee, or, that's also always something that, because there's so many different ways of doing it. And you want to make sure you're doing it right, that people have notice. I think in doing this, you also need to exercise some care in that, one of the things that has happened over the course of the last few years is that people have a different idea about what yards should look like. And depending upon where you're living, some of us might remember years ago, the owner of a famous house in New Ulm, I believe, kept goats and a number of other things in a very prominent location. To them, I'm sure that was a wonderful use of the property. To a lot of other people, it was not. But if you have someone who wants to have their yard in natural prairie flowers or whatever, a neighbor might see that as weeds if they've got a regular lawn. And I don't know if those are things that you even want to get into. Some of this, you just have to be careful that you're not becoming aesthetic police. We like this, we don't like that. But on the other hand, there are cases, and you're aware of some of these, where in the past we have had to essentially condemn properties. I mean, they were infested, they were unsafe, they were not secured properly. We have some properties like that right now. So it's a question of, I guess, how far you want to take it, what the concerns are, but there's a lot to talk about. And I'm not sure, how much of that you want to get into this evening. That's your decision.
In my mind, I agree with the city attorney. Do a subcommittee. I dealt with the blight ordinance for 12 years. It's not a fun issue to deal with, and he is correct. I mean, the city did go through court cases at one time. It took 2 years to tear a house down to get rid of it. It's a lengthy process. It takes a lot of staff time. And in past building officials that I concurred with all say, try to keep aesthetics out of your blight ordinance. It is one of the worst things there is. Because, again, like Mr. Hippert said, I don't like the color or paint chips off your house. One neighbor might care, one might not. I'd not act on it tonight and have a subcommittee meet with Mr. Hippert and go over the highlights of the report that he did give us and go from there.
I guess my comment is one of the comments Roger made is, I think we ought to open up the city charter, do what we need to do there first, and then go into the blight ordinance. Make sure that we got our bases covered, so we got a background of what we can and can't do. And the city charter, we had discussed this once before, that I think we need to appoint a charter commission and go in and look into many other issues within our city charter. We haven't done it for several years. I think it's time to do it again, and let's do it right.
I know the charter might be whole different area, but I think I was a new counselor, and along with President Schmitz when we went through that in 2009, I believe. So it's coming up on quite a few years since we revisited. It needed cleaning up really bad then. I think it was like 25 years prior to that. So we did a lot of cleanup back then, and it was a lot of work for our city attorney's office, but they were really be able to bring it up to speed. I don't know if there's that much work now, but I agree. I think there are some things in there that, like this would be one of them. If we were going to take the step that, yes, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but we can't enforce a fee, we're having taxpayers help pay to take care of somebody else's property. I'm struggling with that a little bit. But I think a committee could help do this. Now, again, my concern is more somewhat the aesthetics, which you might have an issue on, but all of us in our wards have those abandoned properties or nearly abandoned properties. And if you're living next to one of them, my, oh my, you don't want to live there. And some of our statutes talk about property values being dropped because of, that we can act if that does happen. And I think it does. If you were going to pull up and you see an abandoned home, do you want to live next to that abandoned home? I don't know if I do. And I know some of those folks are very frustrated, and they really would appreciate some assistance from us in moving that along. And now, is that going to take some work on a committee to come up to what that wording is? Yeah, I think so. But other cities do it. Other communities have some of these blight policies with regards to broken windows, or if the people aren't even living there and nobody's painted that house in 20 years, or they're doing a lot of them are doing the lawns and they're shoveling the sidewalk because they know we're going to bill them. But meantime, the house is just sitting there falling apart every year, and so I'd like to see something in our ordinance that has something to do with that. And the car issue, when I looked at the abandoned car, because I know that's another thing that some of us have talked about, that is in our statute. I think what we've been pushing is they needed to be tabbed, but it does say that if they're inoperable, they're not supposed to be on public or private property as well. So I don't know if we're enforcing that portion of the statute as well as maybe we should be in the future. So I think that piece might be okay, and we could have Roger take a look at that more specifically, but or law enforcement, because we all know where those abandoned vehicles are as well. We all know where they're sitting. So.
Yeah, and maybe Myron would shed some light on that. Is Myron here?
He's hiding.
Myron's hiding in the corner. But he's listening.
No, he's got the 863 here in charge of it, so.
Tell us about abandoned cars in New Ulm.
Myron Whelan, New Ulm Police Department. I'm very proud to say that the officers are tasked with enforcement of 863. And again, if they're unregistered, again, operable, if there's 4 flat tires, I think we can safely say that. But beyond mechanically, we don't go on the property and survey those vehicles. But again, I could certainly present the council with, we do about 150 letters a year to property owners, and I can provide the last several years' data generically for the next council meeting if you'd like.
One item to add, the police department, this is strictly with the junk vehicles, does do an excellent job. Myron, I don't remember if you were the chief or the previous chief when the license bureau called. Do you remember that? What's up with all these people coming in and re-registering and licensing these vehicles? So the police department was out there doing their job. Motor vehicle noticed it.
Yep, and that would have been prior to '09.
Right.
But again, the license bureau does notice when we are out in summertime and enforcing said ordinance. So 863 is covered. Again,
that's an annual thing that you're doing?
You know what? The polite answer is, unless we're knee-deep in snow, it's year-round.
I still see quite a few, and I've had people within the community, and I've talked to Myron about it before, but it's an issue that's an ongoing issue, and a lot of times we've got repeat people.
Again, and the repeat I want to comment on goes back to with the charter. I had brought this up at a previous meeting. What can we do to stiffen that penalty?
Yeah.
If we're now on our 5th call there, I think it should hurt. The taxpayer shouldn't have to pick up that burden.
Yeah.
This is your 5th time, the fine should go up. Do what we have to do to get that into place.
And another thing to consider, I think, we're taking a look at this as a committee, I think we also have to look at our zoning within our community, with where some businesses more things have accumulated on the properties and within the community, and there's a few of them I can just think out loud on a couple, but,
It's like smaller junkyard type of thing, or?
correct, and whether it should
Mini
have a fence
junkyard.
on it and things like that, and how you want to enforce it, because some things have been spot zoned within the community, and it's, there's special circumstances and things like that, so it's just something to consider when and if we get a committee. I mean, I think, have law enforcement involved or the building official on how we're going to enforce these issues, and if they are enforceable within the community, because it's going to be just a little bit more than just writing a blight ordinance. Some of
Right.
it might be looking at our zoning and where some things have been grandfathered in, but housing isn't approached upon it, or other industries or things like that. So we have to take a really good look at it.
So who do we want on this blight committee? I mean, obviously, we want a law enforcement representative, probably 2 counselors, building inspector, or I would assume maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
I would ask that Mr. Zabel be in it, and also if.
and yourself? or-
Yes, and if we are going to be getting into zoning things, that Dave Schnobrick will
No.
be
Okay.
involved to that extent.
Anybody else you want to have on there?
I'll
can have
get on
Brian.
board if you need one.
Yeah, who wants to be on it from here? I don't, I'll be on it if you want me to, unless somebody else has got. You got a lot of history.
12 years of it.
Well, could give us some pretty good
Dave
feedback
give us
on
the
it, too.
feedback. Dave always says he's got his top 10, so.
We probably all do.
Larry?
I think, maybe even the fire chief, because he's the one out doing the inspections within the community, and I think he
Fire
probably could
chief?
shed some light
Maybe.
on it too, by chance, and maybe things that he might see that he might not be able to enforce.
I think we caught him off guard
Yeah.
a little bit.
So you
I'm
got
fine
all
with-
names, Roger?
You gotta be careful not to have too large a
Depends on
committee so we get it
who
done.
from the council. Would you?
Larry said he would.
Okay.
I would.
And
And you and I, you want to arm wrestle for it, or you really don't want anything to do with it? If you don't, I'll take it.
If you don't want it, I'll go on it. I'm familiar with it.
You're probably gonna have a lot better history than I am, even though I do kind of want to be on it, but I don't have to be on everything.
I won't take it away, though.
No, you take
I
it.
nominate Counselor Schultz.
No, you're on it. You're on it.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion? That was a motion, yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? Do we have a second? Nope.
I'll second it.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion on it?
The only other discussion is maybe, I suppose we can't today because it's not really an agenda item, but maybe we should bring back next meeting to have our charter commission reopened and have some discussion about. The last time what we did is every counselor sat and kind of went through it, and we all picked out areas that we thought needed to be revised, and so we had because that can be a lot of work, and it was about a year process, Roger?
Yeah, and I think if those of you recall it, I mean, the way that it's set up is that once the Charter Commission is established, it's up to them what they're going
Yes.
to do. It's not really the council's call. They would come up with any proposed revisions, et cetera. So the people that you put on that commission, how that's structured and everything else, that's very important. But
Do you remember who we did last time? I mean, I remember,
Sure, we got it right.
Charlie, you and I were on there, right? No, I remember I was on there.
I wasn't.
Oh, I don't remember who else. Maybe Brian can just bring us some more information about
I think we
it.
just put it on the next council agenda for discussion.
Because we had public people involved too.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Linda
Absolutely.
Heine was on it maybe.
Take care of that, Nicole?
Yeah, I think it was probably finished in
Should I call
2009
Brian?
because it changed.
I'll call Brian.
Oh, at 10, I mean, because it changed in 11. One of the things affected
Law
the
enforcement
mayor.
issue, yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay. All right.
Okay, we got no more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 4G, consider resolution authorizing the Civic Center fee discount request for career fair event.
I'll offer this resolution.
Second.
We got a motion and a second, that's for April 4th, 2018.
I think this is the third year that we've been doing this, and
We're waiving the $875 fee.
And I believe last year we added in that the city is a co-sponsor.
I think we
oh,
are.
yeah,
aren't we?
it's on here, number
Yeah.
3. Yeah.
Okay,
No more discussion? Finance Director, please call the roll.
Counselor Fisher?
Yes.
Counselor Mack?
Yes.
Counselor Schultz?
Yes.
Counselor Christian?
Yes.
President Schmitz?
Yes, motion carries. Item 4H, consider motion to set a date for a public hearing on the 2018 MASA, or MSAS Improvement Project for Tuesday, February 20th, 2018 at 4:30 PM.
Just that it's a hearing, I'll offer that motion.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. With no more business, meeting adjourned.